Welcome to Talking Straight. I'm Suresh Kochattil. For a long time, long time, right from the days of the British, a job in the Indian Army meant a secure profession with salaries, pensions and perks that came with it. But with costs going through the roof and very little left for development, the 1.4 million strong Indian Army is now looking at ways to drastically change its profile. The aim is to become a lean, mean fighting machine. The Indian Army is one of the country's and the world's top employers. For many young Indians, it's a coveted and a secure job. But every year, some 60,000 defense personnel retire and the Army holds up to 100 fresh hiring rallies to replace them. For the past 2 years, this hiring has been suspended because of the pandemic. But now the numbers will not go back to its good old ways. One reason why is that the Army's ballooning salaries and pension bill that consumes more than half of its 5 crore 25 lakh 166 crore budget, which is almost $70 billion. Majority of this amount goes for salaries, which is about 31%, and pensions, which is about 23%. About 24% of the defense budget is allocated for weapons, equipment and modernization, and R&D gets a very small share. That leaves little money to modernize the forces and serve the equipment shortfalls. As I said before, out of the total defense allocation of rupees 5 crore 25 lakhs 166 crore for 2022-23, the capital expenditure meant for the new equipment and infrastructure is pegged at only 1 crore 52 lakh 369 crores. Year after year, a chunk of the defense budget goes into paying salaries and pensions, affecting the modernization of the Indian Armed Forces. Effectively, only 30% of the defense budget can be used for capital procurement. On the other hand, let's take China, for example, which spends less than a third of its defense budget on personnel compared to 60% that we spend in India. In fact, the budget for pensions of defense personnel alone is more than the revenue expenditure of critical ministries like health. The number of personnel, the defense personnel, eligible for defense pensions has increased rapidly over the last few years. India is already the world's third largest military spender behind US and China, and the world's second largest importer of arms. The Narendra Modi government is spending billions of dollars now to boost the domestic manufacturing capacity in defense equipment. India also has an ample stockpile of nuclear warheads and ballistic missiles which constantly undergo testing. The government is mulling over a proposal to hire soldiers for a fixed term, and that is what is called Agnipath and the Agniveer scheme, also called a 3-year tour of duty. An army of the future that will be young, nimble and adept with the use of technology. Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi himself is an advocate of reforms. In the past, he has spoken about the need for the forces to be agile, mobile and driven by technology, not just human valor, which is anyway required, and that India needs capabilities to win a swift wars, for we will not have the luxury of long-drawn battles. This logic is not lost as we are looking at the Russia-Ukraine war. What was supposed to be a quick-fire war is now dragging on and on and on. The use of technology seems to have more effect than men on the ground, something that Russia and Ukraine have realized. The forces of the 21st century require quick response by agile armed forces backed by state-of-the-art military technology, more so in the context of our subcontinent, where nuclear weapons preclude large-scale conventional wars. The Indian Army has to do with the ability to make do with less people than they have now. Naturally, we need to cut the flap. The current shortage of more than 1 lakh personnel was a right opportunity to bring about the reforms. Of course, our hostile borders mean that the army needs to be always prepared to fight 2 simultaneous land wars against nuclear-armed rivals, Pakistan and China. One way to deter China would be a greater focus on technology-driven modernization, which in turn would demand trimming the workforce. A question that would come up is, will a hiring freeze impact manpower availability along the unsettled borders across the demanding terrain along China and Pakistan? Critics say that the Indian Army, by replacing professional soldiers with short-term transient soldiers, is risking having experienced soldiers. but the case for a nimbler and a lighter army is not lost on anyone. Army veterans say that the Modi government should own the reforms themselves. As for now, they seem to have left that to the traditional bound military apparatus, which by nature revels in the status quo. Most importantly, which roles will be trimmed in this cut of the flap? The soldier who operates an air defense gun or the soldier who looks after the rations? World over, most armies have outsourced the non-core areas to contractors. Whereas in India, the army still maintains a huge workforce to do all the sundry work. What is not disputable though is that any exercise at downsizing our armed forces has to begin with a comprehensive analysis of India's threat perception, covering the entire gamut of our national security environment. While it cannot be undertaken by a single service, say the army, and unilateral at that, it has to be a cross-departmental, multiple domain effort, looking at internal, external, regional, and the global scenarios. What is confronting India today and over the next 25 years will be a very important factor to consider. The right-sizing plan currently under preparation by the Army should happen in tandem with other services, and it is not in least bit reflective of the current projected threats that our country has to confront. The Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force should also be taken into confidence in any manpower downsizing plan as the Army seeks to implement it. All the three services have to work together in a conflict, and each needs to know what the other two are capable of bringing to the table. All three, after all, are jointly supposed to work towards a theatre command system that was proposed by the late CDS Bipin Rawat. The long-term plan is to cut down the Army's strength to under 11 lakh from the current 13 to 14 lakh plus. This will be done in a phased manner over the next decade. It is felt if the Army has to move towards being a modern force driven by technology, it cannot be manpower intensive. It is estimated that after 10 to 15 years, the strength of the Indian Army will be somewhere in the range of 10 to 10.5 lakhs. And that figure could be maintained the years to come as the Indian military looks to be a technology-driven force cutting down on manpower. Size has to reflect strength, and that is achievable and envisioned. Manpower savings are the best when the sum resources are shared among the services. The Agnipath scheme is the right step in that direction. The Modi government should be credited for having stood up to the political protests that were driven by a mafia who were training young men and women and charging them a hefty amount for a dream job in the army. With 75% of the recruits having to leave in 4 years, the burden of salaries and pension in the long run will also be reduced. The Agnipath scheme is limited to soldiers, or what the military refers to as other ranks. According to the new recruitment policy, soldiers in the armed forces will be recruited initially for a period of 4 years, and only 25% of those will be retained after that. The eligibility criteria, as we all know, is class 12 pass for general duty and class 12 pass for technical, while the age criteria is between 17.5 and 21 years. However, for the first year of recruitment, the age limit has been enhanced to 23 years to accommodate those aspirants who missed out the recruitment due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This has created about 1.0 lakh vacancies in the armed forces which can be filled up. With this new scheme, these vacancies will only increase, but sources say that's not a big problem as the long-term plan is to bring down the numbers anyway. When the concept of Agnipath was mooted, most opposition political parties and organizations whose business plans were upset protested. They provoked youngsters to protest, and in many cases, violently. A carefully planned move by the Indian Armed Forces to be lean and mean fighting machine was sought to be derailed by the opposition. The government of India stood firm, and the top brass of the Indian Army sought to explain why they were doing what they were doing. Now, just weeks before, more than 19,000 Agniveers of the Indian Army have begun training at nearly 40 centers across the country, especially curated courses which involve heavy focus on simulation. The training methodology and infrastructure were adapted to meet the dual requirements of future-ready soldiers and short-duration engagement of the Agniveers. The training, which began the 1st of January 2023, involves both basic and advanced military programs that have been optimized to the standard 24 to 31 weeks. A large number of simulators for training on varied weapons and equipment are being established. Infrastructure creation and staffing of specialists in sports medicine and physiotherapy are being carried out as a preemptive measure for all possible stress injuries at the training centers. The Agniveers will undergo a further 7 weeks on-the-job training after the training at the allotted center. Apart from training imparted at the center, which forms the first layer of inculcating discipline, the second phase, which will take place to the unit in which the Agniveer will be enrolled for 4 years of employment. The tasks, training calendar, and operational duties will enforce a sense of loyalty and duty to the organization, which is the Indian Army, and the country, which is India. The third phase of the training will comprise of interaction with peers, senior NCOs, JCOs, who are non-commissioned officers or junior commissioned officers, and other officers, which will add to an Agniveer's personality and enable him or her to experience the Army way of life. All these layers will ensure that adequate discipline and ethos is imparted into the Agniveer in his or her 4 years of employment. India has to get to a lean and mean fighting machine, and this is a way forward. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.
Please subscribe to Nationalist Hub English channel for more interesting videos, and don't forget to like and share this video. Nationalist Hub, it's a news revolution.